He called her from 2 floors below and told her the flight was canceled. He said it the way he said everything. Smoothly, without hesitation, with the particular calm of a man who had never once been caught at anything. He said there was a weather delay out of O'Hare, that he was stuck at his firm's downtown office finishing a presentation, that she should take a car home and he would be there by 9. Theodora Winslow was standing at the window of the hotel's 23rd floor conference room when she took the call. The workshop had ended early. She had not told him. She had been looking forward to surprising him. A quiet dinner, the kids already in bed, maybe the first real conversation they'd had in months. She was looking down at the hotel lobby entrance when she heard his voice in her ear, and she saw him walk through the revolving door below. He was wearing the navy blazer she had picked up from the dry cleaner 3 weeks ago and left hanging on his side of the closet. His hand was at the small of a woman's back. The woman was laughing. She had dark hair and a weekend bag over her shoulder, and the easy, leaning posture of someone who had been in that position many times before. Theodora did not move. She stood at the glass and watched her husband walk the woman to the elevator bank. She watched him press the button. She watched him lean down and say something that made the woman laugh again. She watched the elevator doors open and swallow them both. She stood at the window for a long time after that. She was still holding her phone. She did not call him back. Theodora Winslow was not, in any way that mattered, the woman her husband believed he had married. Part 1. The architecture of restraint. Her grandmother, Ruth Ainsworth, had built Ainsworth Textile Holdings from a single mill in western Pennsylvania in 1951. By the time Theodora was born, the company had expanded into commercial real estate, logistics infrastructure, and a portfolio of industrial properties spanning 11 states. The Ainsworth name was not famous in the way that tech money was famous. It was the older, quieter kind of money, the kind that shows up in building dedications and hospital wings and endowment plaques that most people walk past without reading. Theodora grew up understanding this. Her mother sat her down at 11 years old and explained it plainly. People change when they know. They do not mean to. They do not always notice that they do, but they change. Every friendship, every romance, every casual acquaintance shifts its gravity when it learns the number. You stop being a person and become a destination. Her mother had been married twice. The first time, at 24, to a man who turned out to have known her family's net worth before their first date. The second time, at 37, to a man who had not. And that marriage, Theodora's father, had held. So Theodora learned to be careful. Not cold, not dishonest. Careful. She cultivated a life that was entirely her own. She took a position in urban planning at a city consultancy in Chicago. She rented a 1-bedroom apartment in Wicker Park. She drove a 7-year-old Subaru and bought her groceries at the same store as her neighbors and paid her own rent and carried her own bags. The trust that her grandmother had established for her, managed by a firm called Ainsworth Capital Partners, overseen by an attorney named George Fallow, who had known Theodora since she was 4 years old, generated more in quarterly interest than most people earned in a decade. She did not touch it. She let it grow. She kept the account statements in a folder in a filing cabinet she had never once left unlocked. She was testing something. She had been testing it her whole adult life. The question was simple and, she had found, almost impossible to answer without running the experiment honestly. Could someone love her without knowing what she was worth? She met Reeve Sommers at a city planning conference when she was 31. He was an architect, ambitious, sharp-boned, the kind of man who spoke in rooms full of people with the confidence of someone who had already decided he was worth listening to. He had opinions about everything. He spoke about his career the way other men spoke about their children. He was interesting in the way that a fast-moving thing is interesting. You find yourself watching it before you've decided you want to. But he also asked her questions. That was what she noticed. Most men she'd met, at events like this, asked her one question as a prelude to talking about themselves. Reeve asked her 3, and then remembered the answers the next time they spoke. He remembered that she preferred the aisle seat on flights. He remembered the name of the neighborhood she'd grown up in. He remembered, 6 weeks later, a book she'd mentioned in passing, and came back with a reaction to it. He remembered her. That felt, at 31, like something. They married 2 years later. City Hall, then dinner with their closest people. Theodora's grandmother sent a card and a handwritten note that said, simply, "I hope he sees you clearly, darling. I hope you let him." Theodora put the note in the filing cabinet with the trust statements. She was not yet sure what to do with either one. Part 2. What she carried. The first years were not bad. That is the thing that made the later years so hard to explain. It was not a bad marriage from the start. There were good seasons. There were evenings that felt like the things she had wanted, and mornings that were easy, and years when Reeve was present in the way she had hoped he would be. But Theodora was watching. She had always been watching. She noticed that Reeve did not ask about her work in the way that suggested genuine curiosity. He asked about it the way you ask someone how they slept. A social formality, a doorway to the next thing. When she talked about a zoning project she was genuinely proud of, he listened until there was a pause he could fill. She noticed that the pause came earlier and earlier. She noticed that their social calendar was, in practice, hers. She remembered birthdays. She sent gifts. She organized the dinners, managed the RSVPs, tracked who owed them a visit and who was going through something and needed checking on. Reeve attended. He was charming when he attended. He received the credit without having done the work and seemed genuinely unaware that the work had been done at all. She noticed that when their daughter June was born, Reeve took 2 weeks off and then returned to his firm and the baby's schedule. The feeding times, the pediatrician appointments, the developmental milestones charted and tracked and worried over became hers alone. She did not ask for help. That was her own failure, she knew. But she had asked, early on, gently twice. The response had been the response of a man who heard the words, but not the sentence underneath them. When their son, Miles, came along 3 years later, she had already stopped asking. She kept records out of habit. Her grandmother had kept records. Her mother kept records. Every receipt, every scheduled appointment, every property tax, every insurance renewal, every contractor invoice, filed and dated and organized in a system that only Theodora understood, because only Theodora had ever needed to understand it. The trust continued to grow. George Fallow sent quarterly reports that Theodora read on her phone in the school pickup line, the number ticking upward with the indifference of a system that did not require her participation to succeed. She was in her late 30s by then. The number was significant. She was not thinking about it yet. She was thinking about the fact that Reeve had come home late 3 Thursdays in a row, and each time had a slightly different explanation. Part 3. The Summers family. Reeve's mother was named Patricia Summers, and Patricia Summers was the kind of woman who made graciousness into a form of control. She was unfailingly polite to Theodora. That was the thing. There was nothing you could point to. No slap, no cold shoulder. Just a consistent, seamless, beautiful exclusion. The kind that required skill and patience and long practice to maintain. The family group text had been started without Theodora. When she mentioned this, Reeve added her. She was in it for 3 weeks before she noticed that the substantive conversations, the holiday plans, the financial discussions, the decisions about their aging uncle's care, happened in a separate thread she had not been added to. She found out at Thanksgiving, when a decision had already been made, a plan already formed, and she was being informed of the outcome. We were just sorting out the details, Patricia said, setting a dish on the table with a smile that was genuinely warm, genuinely lovely, and genuinely false. You know how these things go. You're so busy, Theodora. We didn't want to add to your plate. Reeve's brother, Finn, had a wife named Sunny, who had been absorbed into the family in a way Theodora had not. Sunny called Patricia Mom. Sunny sat at the kitchen counter while Patricia cooked and was handed small tasks and received small confidences, and was consulted about where to hold the Christmas party. Sunny was, by any observable measure, inside a circle that Theodora had been orbiting for 7 years without ever quite entering. She brought it up to Reeve once. She chose her words carefully. She said, "I feel like your family makes decisions without including me, and I would like that to change." Reeve looked at her with the expression she had categorized years earlier, the expression of a man who had heard a problem and decided, in the same moment, that it was not his to solve. "My family loves you," he said. "You read too much into things." She did not bring it up again. She filed it. Part 4. The 19th floor. Theodora had been in Cincinnati for 9 days. A regional transportation infrastructure review, the kind of project she had been leading for years, the kind that required sustained focus and produced results that lasted decades but generated no glamour. She had texted Reeve every evening. He had responded to most of them. He had sounded, each time like himself, slightly distracted, moderately present, fine. June had a soccer tournament that Saturday. Theodora had reminded him twice. He had confirmed twice. She flew home a day early to be there. Her flight arrived at 2:14. She texted from the gate. No reply. She called from baggage claim. He answered on the 6th ring. "Hey," he said. "Listen, something came up at the firm. Hargrove pulled me into a client thing this afternoon. It's going to run late. You should take a car home." "I'll make it work for dinner." She did not respond immediately. In the background, behind his voice, she heard something. Not office sounds, no printers, no muffled phone calls, no air conditioning hum of a high-rise building at full occupancy on a Saturday. She heard music, faint. The ambient music of a hotel lobby or a restaurant, the kind designed to feel like no particular place at all. He was not at the office. "Okay," she said. She hung up. She took the elevator from baggage claim up to the hotel-level connector, the glassed walkway between the international terminal and the attached airport hotel, a shortcut she had used dozens of times. She was not thinking about him. She was thinking about June's tournament, and whether Miles had eaten anything that morning, and whether there was anything in the refrigerator. She was halfway across the glass corridor when she looked through the window at the hotel lobby below. Reeve was at the bar. He was sitting with a woman Theodora did not recognize, dark-haired, early 30s, in a silk blouse and good boots. They were close. Not the closeness of a business meeting, the closeness of people who are used to being in each other's space. Reeve's hand was on the table, and the woman's fingers were resting near it. Not touching. Not quite, but near in a way that had a specific meaning. Theodora stood at the glass. Reeve laughed at something the woman said. The real laugh, the one she knew, the one that started slow and cracked open. The one she had not heard in months. Patricia Sommers was sitting 2 stools down with a glass of white wine, watching them with the serene expression of a woman who approved of what she was seeing. Theodora stood at the glass and looked at all 3 of them. She did not shake. She did not press her hand to the window. She breathed in and out, slowly once. And then she felt something shift that was not grief and was not rage. It was something she recognized from childhood. From the boardroom visits her grandmother had taken her on. From the way her grandmother would look at a balance sheet and go very still before she spoke. It was the stillness before the decision. She picked up her phone and called George Fallow. "George," she said when he answered. "I need to activate the discretionary protocol. Full authority. I need the Cincinnati acquisition paused and redirected, and I need a call with the real estate partners first thing Monday." George did not ask why. George never asked why. That was not what she was paying him for. "Of course, Theodora," he said. "Everything you need." Part 5. The folder on the table. Reeve came home on a Tuesday. He had told her he was at a work retreat upstate. He came home looking the way a man looks when he has been somewhere that felt like relief. Slightly softened, slightly guiltless, the way people look when they've had a break they don't think they had to earn. He set his bag down in the hallway and came into the kitchen and found Theodora sitting at the table. The children were at her sister's. There was a folder on the table. Theodora had made tea she did not intend to drink. "Hey," Reeve said. He opened the refrigerator. "You're home early." "I've been home," she said. "I've been home since Saturday." He turned from the refrigerator slowly. She watched his face. "I saw you," she said. "The hotel, the bar. Your mother was there too, which I have spent several days thinking about." Reeve closed the refrigerator. He did not say anything. This was, she had come to understand, what he did when he was calibrating, buying time, searching for the version of events that could be rearranged into something survivable. She opened the folder. Inside was not a flight manifest. She had not needed one. Inside were 18 months of credit card statements, cross-referenced and annotated in the precise, systematic handwriting of a woman who had grown up in a household where documentation was not paranoia but instinct. Dinners for 2 at restaurants in neighborhoods Reeve claimed not to frequent. A hotel booking in Milwaukee on a weekend he'd said he was with his college roommate. Charges from a florist 3 weeks before her birthday. The birthday on which she had received nothing. She laid them out on the table in chronological order. She watched him look at them. "You've been doing this for at least a year and a half," she said. "Possibly longer. But the card you used for the first 6 months was a business card, and I don't have access to those statements. Yet." Reeve sat down across from her. His posture had changed. The architecture of his confidence, the squareness of his shoulders, the particular way he occupied a room, had gone somewhere else. What was left was just a man at a kitchen table, looking at paper. "It was a mistake," he said. "Theodora, a year and a half is not a mistake," she said. "A year and a half is a choice you made repeatedly. There is a difference." She closed the folder. She placed her hands flat on the table. She had been preparing this moment for several days, and she had decided, in the preparation, that she would not perform grief, and she would not perform fury. Both were real. Neither was what she wanted him to see. What she wanted him to see was the thing she had been hiding for 11 years, the thing that had been growing, quietly, without his knowledge or his interest or his participation, who she actually was. "I want a divorce," she said. "I've already spoken with an attorney. The paperwork is filed. You can stay in the guest room until the process is formally underway." "Theodora, we have June and Miles." "Yes," she said, "which is why I'm telling you in this room and not through a letter delivered by George Fallow's office." He looked up. "George Fallow," she said again. "You may want to write that name down." She stood. She picked up the folder. She walked upstairs. She sat on the edge of the bed and listened to the house settle and breathed, slowly, in the particular quiet of a woman who has said the things she could not unsay and found that the world had not ended. Then she opened her laptop. She had work to do. Part 6. What the name meant. The divorce filing was a starting gun. Theodora did not rush. She never rushed. She moved the way her grandmother had taught her. Precisely, without visible effort, in directions that did not announce themselves until the outcome was already settled. The first thing she did was quiet. Reeves' architecture firm had been pursuing a commission for 3 years. A mixed-use development along the Chicago Riverwalk, the kind of project that would establish a firm's reputation for a generation. The commission was controlled by a development group. The development group was in negotiation with a commercial real estate entity over a critical piece of the land parcel. The entity was a subsidiary of a holding company. The holding company was managed by Ainsworth Capital Partners. The land belonged to Theodora. She did not pull it from the negotiation. She did not block the deal. She simply did not return calls. Emails from the development group went to George's office and received polite procedural acknowledgments, and then nothing. The negotiation stalled. Reeves' firm's timeline stretched. Partners began to ask questions. Reeves did not know. He could not have known. The holding company's name, a Delaware LLC called Hartwell Properties, meant nothing to him. It had never occurred to him to ask his wife about the land parcels in the city she had worked in for 11 years. It had never occurred to him, in 11 years of marriage, to ask. The second thing was visible. The Ainsworth Foundation had been dormant during Theodora's marriage. She had kept it quiet deliberately. One more thing she was testing. One more thing she kept behind the door. She reopened it. She funded a civic architecture fellowship, awarded annually to an early career architect, whose work centered on affordable housing and community infrastructure. The announcement went to local press. The fellowship was named the Ruth Ainsworth Award for Public Design. The press release mentioned the Ainsworth family. It mentioned Theodora by name, in her capacity as foundation chair. It mentioned the scope of the Ainsworth Capital portfolio. Reeve found out from a colleague, who texted him a link and wrote, simply, "Is this your wife?" He stared at his phone for a long time. His firm's senior partner called him into the office the following week to ask whether there was any possibility of a conversation with the Ainsworth Foundation about the Riverwalk Commission. The senior partner had not previously known that Reeve was married to a woman with this kind of reach. The senior partner was, it must be said, visibly struggling to process several things at once. Reeve did not know what to say, because he did not know what to say. He had been married to Theodora for 11 years, and he had never once thought to look up her family name. He had known she had a grandmother. He had known the grandmother was in Pennsylvania. He had asked, early on, what she did, and Theodora had said, textiles and property, and Reeve had nodded and changed the subject and never circled back. He had been circling back in his mind ever since he read the press release. He was still circling. He went home and sat in the guest room and looked at the ceiling and tried to remember every conversation he had ever had with his wife, about money, about her family, about the trust she had mentioned once, briefly, in the 3rd year of their marriage, in a way he had not followed up on. He could not remember following up on it. He could not remember being curious. Part 7. The disassembly, the household, the system Theodora had maintained alone for 11 years, did not so much collapse without her, as reveal itself to have always been a one-person operation. The health insurance renewal lapsed because the account was registered to her email. The account for the parking permit auto-payment bounced because the card on file had been in her wallet. June's orthodontist had been scheduled through Theodora's phone. The appointment was missed and the slot forfeited. Miles's school required a form re-signed that only existed in Theodora's files. Reeve called her 7 times in the first 3 weeks. She answered 5 of them. She answered with the precise, patient clarity of someone reading instructions aloud to a person who has never opened the manual. She gave him the insurance provider's name. the parking permit account number, the name of June's orthodontist, and the office administrator who could help reschedule. The location of the physical file where the school forms were kept, in the third drawer of the filing cabinet in the home office, in the folder marked Miles School, a folder she had maintained since he started kindergarten. After the fifth call, she stopped answering. Patricia Summers came to help. Patricia, who had visited Theodora's home every 6 weeks for 11 years, and had never once asked how anything worked, who had accepted every spotless guest towel and fully stocked herbal tea and home-cooked meal as the natural condition of a well-managed house, attributable to nothing and no one in particular. Patricia spent 2 weeks in that house and came out the other side a slightly different woman. She called Finn from the driveway the day she left. She was running it, Patricia said. Not just the house, everything. The calendar, the finances, the children's schedules, the social obligations, all of it. I thought she was just organized, Finn said. Patricia was quiet for a moment. I think, she said finally, that we mistook her competence for convenience. She drove away. The woman Reeve had left Theodora for. Her name was Mara. Theodora had eventually found out. She was a junior architect at a competing firm. Lasted 5 months in the arrangement before she understood what she had entered into. Mara had been attracted to Reeve Sommers. She had not been attracted to Reeve Sommers unmanaged, unscheduled, operating without the invisible infrastructure of an extremely capable woman who had quietly run every component of his life. She left on a Wednesday. She left a note that Reeve later described as baffling. It said, "I think I fell in love with a version of you that wasn't really you." He read that note many times. He read it the way you read something that makes you understand something you didn't want to understand. Part 8. The brownstone on Marlowe Street. Theodora bought the house 4 weeks after she filed. Not a rental. She had been renting for 11 years in a house that belonged to both of them and felt, increasingly, like neither. This was hers, a 4-bedroom brownstone in Lincoln Square, walking distance from June's school, with a kitchen that faced east and caught the morning light, and a garden in the back that Miles immediately claimed as the domain of their dog, a retriever mix named Clover, who had been, for the past several years, entirely Theodora's dog in practice despite being a family dog in theory. She bought it outright, through the trust, in cash, in 14 days. She stood in the empty kitchen, the day she got the keys, and put her hands on the countertop and breathed. Just breathed. There was nothing else to do in that moment, and she did not force anything else. June chose the room with the built-in bookshelves. Miles chose the one with the window that faced the backyard so he could, as he explained with complete seriousness, monitor the garden situation. Clover chose the patch of sunlight at the bottom of the stairs and decided it was hers, and that was final. Theodora went back to work, not to the consultancy, but to the Ainsworth Foundation, where she took the role of executive director. She had been offered twice before and declined because the timing had not been right, or she had not been ready, or she had been running another test she no longer needed to run. The foundation funded urban infrastructure projects, affordable housing initiatives, and a growing program supporting economic independence for women navigating life transitions. She was good at it. She was, in fact, remarkable at it. She brought to a 7-figure philanthropic organization the same meticulous operational instinct she had applied to running a household, which turned out to be not a lesser skill, but exactly the same skill at a larger scale. A business journal ran a profile in the spring. They called her a quiet force in Great Lakes philanthropy. The piece mentioned the Ainsworth name, the portfolio, the fellowship, the foundation's recent growth. It mentioned the divorce in a single clause, following a recent personal recalibration, and spent 4 pages on her vision for the foundation's next decade. The photograph was taken on the front steps of the Marlowe Street brownstone, late afternoon light. Theodora in a dark blazer with her arms crossed loosely, and her expression the particular expression of a woman who was no longer explaining herself to anyone. Reeve saw it. He saw it on a Thursday morning at his firm, sent to him by his senior partner with the subject line, "Thought you'd want to see this." He read it twice. He did not recognize the scale. He recognized her, the tilt of her chin, the way she stood. But the Ainsworth Capital portfolio, the foundation assets, the name on the civic fellowship, the consulting relationships with 3 city governments. None of that was the woman he thought he had been married to. None of that was the woman he had described at a dinner party 3 years ago as my wife. She does city planning. She's very organized. She had been organized the way a river is organized. He had looked at the surface and concluded he understood the depth. Part 9. What he never asked. He called her on a Sunday night in October. She was on the back porch. Clover was asleep at her feet. Miles had left a pair of mud-caked shoes by the garden gate, and she had been looking at them with something close to affection. She let the phone ring 4 times. Theodora. Reeve. I saw the piece. I know, she said. Silence. I didn't know, he said finally. Any of it. The foundation, the portfolio. I had looked at the garden. She had planted rosemary along the fence 2 weeks ago. It was already taking. You didn't know, because you didn't ask, she said. That's not the same thing as me hiding it. You had 11 years to be curious about your own wife, about where I came from, about what my grandmother built, about the trust she established, about why a woman who earns a city planner's salary was never once stressed about money. You never asked any of it. I thought I knew you. You knew the parts I showed you. The rest was there. You just weren't looking. A pause. My mother wants to apologize, he said. Theodora was quiet for a moment. Your mother wants to renegotiate, she said. That's different. She had 11 years to include me, and she chose, systematically, not to. She doesn't get to revise that history because she's seen a balance sheet. Another pause, longer this time. The Riverwalk Commission, he said. My firm has been trying to reach Hartwell Properties for 4 months. The deal is about to fall apart completely. Our senior partner is Theodora, he said. I know, she said. The silence stretched. Hartwell Properties is mine, Reeve. He did not say anything. The parcel has been in the Ainsworth portfolio for 9 years. Your firm has been trying to acquire land from your own wife. And you didn't know because you never, not once in 11 years, sat down with me and said, tell me about your family. Tell me about your work. Tell me who you actually are. Her voice was even. It carried across the dark backyard with the weight of everything she had decided not to say for a very long time, and had now permanently set down. I'm not going to sell it to your group, she said. Not as a punishment. Because the commission isn't the right fit for the parcel and the numbers don't work. If your firm restructures the proposal and meets the Ainsworth Foundation's community benefit requirements, you're welcome to submit through the standard process. You'll be evaluated the same as anyone else. Theodora, I want you to understand something, she said. I hid who I was because I wanted to know if someone could love me without the name, without the number, without the weight of what I came from bending everything toward it. She paused. I found out that you couldn't, not because of the money, because you weren't curious. You spent 11 years living next to a person and never once wondered about the interior of her life. You consumed what I produced and called it partnership. You let your mother exclude me and called it family. You carried on with someone else for 1.5 years and called it a mistake. The rosemary rustled at the fence. Clover shifted at her feet. That is the answer to the question you never asked. She ended the call. She sat for a while in the quiet that followed. She poured the last of her coffee. The garden was dark and alive, smelled like October and rosemary, and Miles's mud-caked shoes were still at the gate, and Clover was breathing slowly at her feet, and the city hummed its ordinary hum somewhere beyond the fence. She thought about the hotel window, the glass corridor, standing above all of it, watching. She did not think about it with grief. She thought about it the way you think about the moment you finally understood something you had been trying to understand for a long time. Part 10. The choice that was not a secret. In February, almost 16 months after the airport hotel, Theodora sat in the Marlowe Street kitchen with a cup of coffee and her laptop and the morning light falling across the table in the way it had every morning since she moved in, which she had not yet stopped noticing. The Foundation's annual report was open on the screen. The numbers were good. The fellowship had received 43 applications in its second year. 3 of the housing projects they'd funded had broken ground. The Women's Economic Independence Program had served 61 participants in its first cohort. She had a meeting at 10 and a call with George at noon, and a school pickup at 3:15 that she had put in her own calendar and did not need to remind anyone about. June had asked, the previous week, whether they could plant tomatoes in the spring. Miles had asked, with total seriousness, whether Clover could have a dog friend. Both questions were under active consideration. She opened a different folder on her laptop, not a legal folder, not a financial document, a folder she had created the night of the hotel window and had been adding to, occasionally, ever since. Photographs and notes, not of evidence but of the life she was building. June at the bookshelf, Miles and Clover in the garden. The rosemary along the fence, green in October and still green now in winter. The Ainsworth Award ceremony, her grandmother's name on the projection screen, The room full of people who understood why it mattered. She had not deleted this folder. She did not need to. The filing cabinet in the home office still held the trust statements, neatly organized by quarter, the same way it had always held them. But the filing cabinet also held, now, other things. June's school artwork, filed by grade. Miles's growth chart, measured on the kitchen doorframe in pencil and photographed before they'd moved so she wouldn't lose it. A card her grandmother had sent 14 years ago. I hope he sees you clearly, darling. She had seen herself clearly, in the end. That was what no one who didn't know her would understand from the outside. The profile, the portfolio, the foundation, the brownstone. From the outside, it looked like a woman coming into power. From the inside, it felt simpler than that. It felt like stopping a test she had been running so long she'd forgotten it was a test. She had wanted to be loved without the name. She had learned, the hard way, and then the very hard way, that what she had actually needed was to stop making herself smaller in order to be lovable. That the name was part of her. The foundation was part of her. The filing instinct and the rosemary and the 6 a.m. school lunches and the quarterly reports read in parking lots. All of it was her, entire, and the right person would want to know all of it, would ask about all of it, would sit across from her and say, "Tell me more," without an agenda, and mean it. She was not looking for that person right now. She was, for the first time in a very long time, looking at herself. Outside, the street was waking up. She heard Miles on the stairs, the particular thundering of a 7-year-old in no particular hurry who was somehow always loud. She heard Clover's nails on the hardwood, following him. She closed the laptop. She got up to make more coffee and start the morning, and begin, once again, the ordinary work of a life that was entirely, exactly hers. Some women spend years becoming smaller, so that the people around them can feel larger. Theodora Winslow spent 11 years disappearing, one careful accommodation at a time, inside a marriage that mistook her competence for convenience and her silence for contentment. She did not leave loudly. She did not leave in a way that anyone would have described, from the outside, as dramatic. She left the way she had done everything her whole life, precisely, thoroughly, without waste. And when she was done, she did not look back. The view from where she was standing was better.